What's up, Ninja Nerds? It is me, Julianna Holmes, and today, before we get going, I just want to give a giant thank you to each and every one of you because I have now reached over 1,000 subscribers and I have over 4,000 watch hours, and I'm in the process of joining the YouTube partnership program. So thank you so much. I appreciate you, and I hope I can keep bringing you fun and interesting martial arts content for many years to come. Without further ado, let's talk about the topic at hand. Balance within the martial arts. Most every martial art that comes from the continent of Asia is inevitably tied to the spiritual traditions and philosophies of that region, namely China, Korea, and Japan, and the history of Buddhism and Taoism and how they are connected to the martial arts. Now, you do not have to convert to Buddhism or Taoism in order to practice any of these martial arts, but it certainly helps on your martial arts journey if you can gain a deeper understanding of these philosophies and mindsets to enrich your martial arts experience and to have a deeper understanding of where your martial arts come from and the thought process that went into them when they were being created. So first and foremost, let's talk about this symbol right here. You may know it as the yin yang or the yin and yang, and that is true, but that actually only refers to one or the other. The whole symbol together is actually known as the Tai Chi, which is where we get the term Tai Chi Chuan, the internal martial art from China. Most Westerners, when we are describing this symbol, we just talk about, oh, it means balance, it means harmony, harmony of opposites, that kind of thing. And that's not wrong, but that is a very surface level and cursory understanding of what this symbol actually represents. The symbol for Tai Chi, for the yin yang, comes from Taoism, which is a philosophical and spiritual tradition from China. And it represents not only balance and harmony, but the Tai Chi, or the yin yang symbol, is describing the dualistic nature of our universe and how the universe, from its inception, from its creation, had these connected things that are that cannot exist without each other. You cannot have yin without yang. They go together like peanut butter and jelly. The Taoists describe how you cannot have darkness without light, and vice versa. In fact, there wouldn't be a word for darkness if we didn't have light. The concept of male and female, these are two things that are inextricably connected, and you cannot have one without the other, and they rely on one another. And we can go on and on and on. There's always this kind of cosmic dance of these harmonious opposites working together. And it doesn't mean that the black is always evil and the white is always good and things like that. It is more these connected ideas that cannot be separated, because that's how the whole universe operates. And so right from its inception, Chinese martial arts were infusing this philosophy into their practice. And this can be seen from, like, for example, in Tai Chi, if the opponent pushes, you pull, you go with them, right? And you can see these things, especially in the soft style martial arts like Aikido, same idea. You are using the opponent's force against them. It's not force against force. You are kind of meeting them and going with their energy and so on and so forth. So, right away, even within the techniques and the strategies of these martial arts, Tai Chi is baked into it, or the yin yang is baked into it, right? And so we can see that balance is necessary within the martial arts, just as with everything in life. And just as the wise sages and senseis have been teaching for a millennia, if you cannot find balance, whether in your martial art or in your life, problems will inevitably arise. So what does it mean to approach your martial arts training with balance? Well, buckle up, because the answers are layered and intriguing. In addition to the Tai Chi, or the yin yang, being an important symbol in martial arts, you will also see the symbol of the triangle repeated in many, many martial arts logos and schools. And there's good reason for that, because many times this balance is found within kind of a trifecta. There's three things that sort of go together, and you have to keep them in balance. I can't take credit for this one. I learned this from Grandmaster Ed Sines, 9th degree black belt, when I first moved to Texas and started working for the Kickstart Kids Foundation. He was my boss at the time, and he was actually one of the original Kickstart Kids instructors, so he put it to me this way. A balanced martial art must have three things. It should be an art form, it should have a sporting aspect to it, and you should be able to defend yourself with it. First and foremost, an art form. We can look at art as the expression of one's inner self, the expression of the human spirit, right? The first definition of art that we find, if we look it up in the dictionary, is the expression or application of human creative skill and imagination, typically in visual form, such as painting or sculpture, producing works to be appreciated primarily for their beauty or emotional power. Okay. Now, we say visual form, well, that could also take place with human movement. I mean, martial arts are an art form very similar to the way dancing is an art form. It can create an emotional response within the viewer, right? And you are expressing something internally. You're expressing your spirit. Martial arts are, in fact, an art form that we can express ourselves. And even in combat sports, you know, the creativity in which somebody moves, puts combinations together, the creativity that it takes to create a strategy that opposes your opponent's strategy, the timing and everything like that, it really can be viewed as an art form. Kata, you know, a lot of people, they point to, well, you got your sparring, that's your self-defense, and then you got your kata, which is your art form. A lot of people even say you can't fight with kata. Well, I beg to disagree. Kata is the very heart of karate. And actually, we can even extend that. We can say kata, pumse, tul, hyong, I believe it's Taolu in Chinese. So any of your martial arts that have forms practice is absolutely an art form. It's a moving meditation. The practitioner is expressing something from within, their confidence, their spirit. And no two katas are going to look exactly alike. The practitioner brings something of themselves to the performance. And so it absolutely is an art form. It's a thing of beauty to appreciate. However, if you know anything about the application of the movements, what in Japanese would be called bunkai, you will absolutely see that, yes, your kata is art, but it's also self-defense. The self-defense moves within your art are embedded in your kata. And so if you have a good understanding of your kata and the bunkai that goes with it, then you can understand the self-defense that the senseis from hundreds of years ago were baking into this that they passed on to their students. Right? So again, being a balanced martial artist, you should have an understanding of all aspects of your art form, including kata. So now let's talk about self-defense. Absolutely, a competent martial artist should have the ability to defend themselves. If you are training in a martial art that is not going to give you the adequate ability to protect yourself in unarmed combat, well, then you're doing yourself a major disservice. You can't protect yourself. Why aren't you doing a dance class or a yoga class or some other activity that could equally enrich your life, but you're not learning to protect yourself? So it really does, it does speak to the necessity that a martial art, the first word being martial, that you have to know how to protect yourself, right? The father of modern karate, Gichin Funakoshi, he was quoted in his book, Karate-Do, My Way of Life. I forget the exact, I'd have to go through and find it, but he's quoted as saying something to the effect of karate was designed to protect oneself from ruffians and thieves. So it was absolutely, from the inception, it was designed as a self-defense art, right? And speaking of Gichin Funakoshi in the Karate-Do, My Way of Life, a lot of karate practitioners might be surprised to know that the father of modern karate, who brought karate from Okinawa to Japan, and then from there it spread all over the world, he was very much against turning karate into a competitive sport, particularly sparring into a competitive sport, because he felt that it was going to water down the art form, right? And so you have this other one here, and now we can kind of scratch our heads. Well, the father of modern karate didn't see the need for this. And I see where he's coming from. In fact, this always happens with martial arts as they become sportified or gamified. The moment you start applying rules to the game, the moment you start saying, okay, well, this is 1 point, this is 2 points, you're only allowed to hit above the belt, you start putting rules to this, well, then practitioners, especially the practitioners who are very invested in competing, they're going to tailor their training to the competition. They're going to be practicing what they need to do to win in the competition, right? So if somebody is very heavily invested in winning a karate tournament, well, I can't pull out a knife on you in a karate tournament and attack you that way. I can't have a couple of my friends jump you and hold you so that I can punch you in the face. There's a lot of things where, you're not training for that eventuality in self-defense, but you're training for the competition itself. And so, and what happens is then you have these high level champions who are training. And by the way, most of y'all world karate champs, national karate, you could probably whoop my butt. So I'm not trying to throw shade at all, okay? But you have to be conscious of the fact that your end goal is going to affect the rest of your training. If you are training to the competition, and your end goal is competition, then you're going to be leaving things out of your training that might otherwise come in handy for this part, for self-defense, right? So, and it happens to every martial art to a degree when they become sportified or gamified. I mean, jiu-jitsu has gone through kind of this similar thing as karate. I am by no means a jiu-jitsu expert, but it's my understanding that you have a lot of positional dominance and things like that that count for points within the jiu-jitsu competition. And so you have these jiu-jitsu competitors who are getting very good at jiu-jitsu specific skills that might not translate as much to a street fighting scenario, right? And then, of course, if you're not training, whether you be karate, taekwondo, jiu-jitsu, hapkido, whatever it is, if you're not training with the idea of weapons in mind, you've got issues, you know. What's the difference between, you know, this being a hooking punch versus being a slash with a blade, right? If I had my blade here, okay, it's a dry erase marker, don't freak out, okay, and I'm coming at you this way, was that a punch or a slash, right? And so that's why, me personally, I really enjoy training in the Filipino martial arts as well, because they do address, in particular, the blade. And so, very important to have some depth and some understanding of what real self-defense entails. You know, the bad guys rarely fight fair. Now, it seems like I'm throwing shade at sport karate or sport martial arts, which isn't the case at all. I just think that you need to approach it with a balanced mindset, right? Tournaments should be an aspect of your training. They allow you to set goals for yourself that are outside of just belt testing. They allow you to kind of put yourself in the hot seat and pressure test yourself under pressure, right? Where you are, you know, when you go into a karate tournament, you don't know the judges necessarily, you don't know your competitors necessarily. You're nervous. You're feeling that you know, the butterflies in your stomach and so on and so forth. And you have to be able to operate in spite of that. You have to be able to think clearly, follow your game plan, and do what you've been trained to do, even though your heart might be racing and you're freaking out, right? You got to learn how to keep that stone cold expression and keep yourself, even though you might be feeling on the inside, the opponent can't see it on the outside, right? And so those skills are really best practiced in a tournament setting. In my opinion, tournaments do have value. They help you set goals for yourself. They're kind of a courage simulator where when you go into that tournament, you're putting that pressure on yourself in a relatively safe environment. You know that, you know, people are going to follow the rules. There's not going to be 3 guys jumping you in a back alley. They're not going to have weapons. It's a fair fight. And so you're in a relatively safe place. There's, you know, referees and there's the medical people if you need it. And so it's a great way in a relatively safe environment to pressure test your skills and develop that courage muscle, right? Keeping with the theme of the triangle, we have another one, and you've probably seen this before. Mind, body, and spirit. In no particular order, by the way. I'm not saying one is more important than the other or anything like that. Let's discuss. So first and foremost, the most obvious one is body, right? We are training in martial arts physically. We are getting in shape. We're stretching. We're, you know, doing calisthenics. We are practicing physical movements with our body. And so we are developing, hopefully, a healthier, stronger, more resilient body. We are utilizing our body as a weapon. I always tell my students, you know, in karate, it's empty hands. So what is your weapon? Yourself, your body. You got to keep the weapon sharp. So that's why we train, right? We got to stretch. We got our push-ups and our sit-ups. That's sharpening the weapon. And hopefully, if you are in a good dojo with a good instructor and you have, you know, again, a balanced approach to training, then you are getting stronger and healthier with your martial arts training. Let's talk about the mind aspect. When speaking about the mind, we're talking in martial arts terms, things like memory retention, you know, being able to remember your forms, remember your patterns, strengthening your memory, strengthening your ability to recall information, We are talking about self-control, which in my opinion is the same as having self-discipline, right? Your ability for your mind to control your actions, to control your impulses and things like that. As self-control is very important. Problem solving, when you get into self-defense training, you have to know the correct response for the correct attack. In sparring, same thing. You have to recognize what techniques, what strategies your opponents are using, and you have to be able to, on the fly, be able to kind of problem solve. You are in the midst of one of the most maybe stressful types of competition, combat sports, and you have to be able to think clearly and problem solve whatever your opponent's giving you in that moment. You have to be able to solve that problem, right? It's like doing a Rubik's Cube while you're trying to not be attacked by a shark or something. Anyway, and then going right along with that, the ability to adapt, the ability to have that kind of fluidity of thought where it's like, oh, they change strategies, I change strategies. All of that is mental training, right? And then, of course, spirit. This is the one that kind of people get lost in the weeds, and I think a lot of people's hackles go up because when we say spirit, we think religion. Again, not trying to convert anybody to any specific religious practice or anything along those lines. When we're talking about spirit, we are talking about more of the emotional side of things. We're talking about your intuition. We are talking about a lot of the things that we perceive as martial arts values. Things like patience, respect, humility, and perseverance. These things would all be kind of on that spiritual side of the equation. And so all of those things are developed as you develop your martial arts skills and as you continue your martial arts practice. And you can't really have one without the other. You can't really train the body without that emotional, spiritual connection of like perseverance and dedication, right? You can't really train in martial arts without using your mind, because you're going to learn about, techniques and strategies and history and philosophy and all of these types of things. So you're developing your mind within the martial arts as well. This is why I always kind of chuckle whenever I tell my students that there is writing in martial arts. Almost every black belt test I've ever taken, in fact, I think every black belt test I've ever taken, there's been a written component. There's been some kind of an essay that you had to write. And my kids, especially the ones who don't like school, whatever, they get really salty about that. But at the end of the day, we're developing not just our physical skills. We're not just learning how to bask each other's faces in. We are developing the whole package. That's what martial arts is for. What is that Joe Rogan quote? Joe Rogan was actually quoting his instructor in Taekwondo when he said, martial arts are a vehicle for developing your human potential. And so that's absolutely accurate. And proof is in the pudding right there. And keeping on the theme of the triangle as being a symbol in the martial arts, there is one more I'd like to go over, and that is, number 1, striking. Number 2, grappling. Okay? And then there's one more. Now, already, everybody's always very fiercely loyal to their system of martial arts. And so, you're going to have the grapplers who are going to tell you that grappling is the absolute best thing you should be able to do. And then vice versa. The strikers are very passionate and very loyal to their art, and you should be able to learn how to kick and punch and these types of things. And in reality, you kind of need both in order to be a competent self-defender as well as a complete martial artist, right? But both of these, you will often see them leave out one key component: weapons. Now, you have to be able to do all of these. And we could even get deeper into the woods about, soft style versus hard style and internal versus external and all these types of things, which also require balance, right? But in your martial arts training, if you want to be a complete martial artist, all 3 of these things should be addressed. You will see grapplers who they don't have the footwork, they don't have the range, they don't have a deep understanding of how to deal with somebody who's punching and kicking, right? And so the grapplers, they'll sometimes suffer because, especially when you watch MMA and you have somebody who's a really top-notch kickboxer and somebody who maybe has not done as much striking, but they came from either wrestling or jiu-jitsu, and whether or not they end up closing the gap, they're going to take some punishment beforehand. A quality striker is going to be, keeping you at a distance, keeping you at the range that they want you so they can light you up. They're going to be kicking at the legs and things to take away your footwork and to take, to do damage to you and things of that nature. So grappling is not all you need, and vice versa. Striking is not all you need, because whereas everybody has a puncher's chance to land that clean shot and knock somebody out, if you don't know how to handle yourself at all once they get your hands on you, they can eat a couple shots, they get in, they do a double leg takedown, and now you're in a world of hurt. And so everybody needs to have some knowledge of grappling so that you can at least deal with the fact that there's somebody on top of you. Now, this is true whether we're talking about sport MMA or whether we're talking about self-defense. You need a balance of all of them. And what you see a lot, especially within sport martial arts, be it karate, be it Muay Thai, be it, jiu-jitsu, whatever the case is, they often forget about the third one in the trifecta, and that's weapons. Especially if you've been training for sport, you've been training to compete in jiu-jitsu and things, or you've been training to compete in karate. What you don't think about is weapons, number one, and I'm speaking specifically with blades. Guns are not necessarily a completely separate thing, but they add a whole new set of issues because there's the distance management and things. So let's keep it to blades for the moment. Blades are small, they're easily concealable, they move in weird random directions where you can't always anticipate where they're going to go, and the worst part about that is they can do damage no matter where they go. And maybe your karate style blocks and things, you can try, but you're in trouble. So weapons have a different range, they move differently, and every single time the opponent makes contact, you're taking damage. And that's a very frightening thing in real-world self-defense. There has to be a balance, and you really have to have that ability to transition from each fighting range, from weapons range, kicking range, punching, to elbows and knees and trapping, into wrestling, and then of course ground fighting and so on and so forth. So to be a complete martial artist, you have to have that balance. And you're looking at me and you're saying, but how do we have time for all of that? That's the fun of it. There's always more to learn in martial arts. There's always more. And getting back to the mind, body, and spirit, you also have to understand that if we are practicing the values that our martial arts teach, discipline, respect, kindness, dedication, all of these things, responsibility, when we are practicing the values that martial arts teach us, you're more than likely not going to get into a bunch of street fights because you're not making people mad at you. There aren't going to be as many people who want to, hurt you. So very, very important that we are living the lifestyle of a martial artist. If we are respectful, if we are kind, if we have self-control, then more often than not, people aren't going to want to attack us. And if they do, well, if we can't de-escalate, then we have our skills to fall back on. That's why karate has always been a last resort, self-defense, right? When everything else has failed, I've tried talking, I've tried retreating, and nothing is working. Now it's time for you to bring out your skills, right? So that is my rant on balance within the martial arts. I hope you found it useful. I hope you got something out of it. If you did, please hit that like button, subscribe. Don't forget to share with all your friends, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks.